It had been another long day at the restaurant. She had been on her feet since the afternoon, moving between tables, carrying trays heavier than they looked, and answering the same questions from customers again and again with the same polite smile she had learned to keep on her face. By the time the clock struck midnight, her body ached and her mind felt heavy, but she was finally free to go home. This was the routine she had followed for months now. The money wasn't great, but it was enough to help her keep up with her expenses, and she was proud that she didn't have to depend on anyone. She changed out of her uniform, folded it neatly, and slipped into her simple everyday clothes. The restaurant had almost emptied out by that time. Chairs were stacked on tables, the lights were dimmed, and the manager gave her a tired nod as she stepped outside. The night air was cooler than it had been inside, and she took a deep breath, enjoying the freshness that greeted her. For a moment, she felt relieved, free from the noise of customers, the clattering of plates, and the endless running around. The street was quiet. This was not unusual. She had walked this path many times before after late shifts, and though the emptiness always made her feel a little uneasy, she had grown used to it. Street lights stood at intervals, their yellow glow spilling onto the pavement, leaving long stretches of shadow in between. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the silence, and every so often, a distant car passed by, breaking the stillness for a moment. She pulled her bag closer to her side and began walking at her usual pace. She knew this road well. It wasn't a long walk, but at this hour, every minute felt longer than it should. She usually distracted herself by thinking about her day, how many customers she had served, which tables gave her trouble, or which small moments made her smile. Sometimes she even planned what she would do on her day off. Tonight, though, her thoughts were drowned out by the silence around her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly pulled it out. It was a message from her mother, asking if she had left work yet. She typed back a short reply, saying yes and that she would be home soon. Her mother often worried about her walking alone this late, but she always reassured her that she was careful. She had no choice, work ended late, and buses at this hour were unreliable. She thought of how she used to be afraid in the beginning, clutching her bag tightly and jumping at every sound, but over time, she had convinced herself it was just her imagination. The night stretched on quietly. She passed by closed shops, their shutters pulled down, and a bakery where the smell of fresh bread still lingered faintly in the air. In the distance, she could see the small park she always walked past. During the day, the park was full of children playing, but now it was deserted, with only the rustle of leaves in the wind. She quickened her steps without thinking. Her shoes clicked softly against the pavement, and the sound seemed louder than usual. She glanced over her shoulder once, just to be sure. The street was empty. A cat darted across the road, and she let out a small laugh at how quickly her heart had jumped. She told herself she needed to stop overthinking. Nothing had ever happened to her before, and there was no reason to think tonight would be any different. Still, something about the night felt heavier. Maybe it was her exhaustion, maybe it was the way the shadows stretched across the road, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't completely alone. She adjusted the strap of her bag, keeping her head high, and continued walking. She reminded herself of the advice her friend had once given her: never look afraid, even if you are. Her mind drifted back to work as she tried to push away the uneasiness. She thought about the elderly couple who had left her a kind note on their bill, thanking her for her patience. That small act had brightened her shift more than she expected. She smiled at the memory, though it faded quickly as a sudden gust of wind swept through, rattling a loose signboard nearby. The sound made her stop in her tracks for a second, but she shook her head and kept moving. She could see the long stretch of road ahead that led to her neighborhood. The street lights grew fewer there, leaving the path darker. She always hated this part the most. She pulled her phone out again, pretending to scroll, even though she wasn't really reading anything. Somehow, Holding the glowing screen made her feel less alone, like a small shield against the shadows. As she walked further, she thought about her family waiting for her at home. Her mother would probably still be awake, no matter how many times she told her not to wait. That thought comforted her a little. Soon, she would be in her warm room, safe, away from the silence of the street. She clung to that thought as her tired legs carried her forward. Minutes passed, and the road seemed endless. Every step echoed, bouncing off the quiet walls of buildings. She glanced around, noticing small details she usually ignored: the cracked pavement, a broken street light flickering weakly, the faint hum of a power line. All of it made the night feel more alive, though not in a comforting way. She tried to walk faster, telling herself she just wanted to get home sooner, but deep down, she knew it was because of the feeling that was growing inside her chest. The feeling that someone might be there, watching. She told herself she was imagining it again, the way she often did, but the thought refused to leave her mind. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint smell of rain. She glanced up at the sky, seeing dark clouds slowly covering the stars. She sighed. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in the rain after such a long day. She clutched her bag closer and decided she would run the last few minutes if the drops started falling. But for now, she just kept walking, her footsteps steady, her mind caught between exhaustion and unease. She didn't know what the night had in store for her. She didn't know that this ordinary walk home, which she had done countless times, was about to change into a memory she would never forget. The night seemed endless as she walked further down the dark road. Her legs were heavy from hours of standing, but her heart beat faster than her footsteps. She told herself she was only tired, that her mind was playing tricks on her, but the strange feeling at the back of her neck refused to go away. Every sound, every shadow felt sharper. Then, it happened. Out of nowhere, she felt a hand grab her arm. She gasped, almost stumbling forward, her breath caught in her throat. Her first thought was that she was being attacked, that everything she had feared was finally happening. She turned quickly, her eyes wide, ready to scream. A man stood there. His face was half lit by the faint glow of a streetlight, and his grip on her arm was firm but not crushing. His eyes were intense, focused, as if he was in a hurry. Before she could speak, he leaned closer and whispered in a low voice, "Walk faster." The words froze her. She didn't know whether to feel more terrified or confused. Walk faster? Why? Was he warning her or threatening her? Her mind spun with questions. She wanted to pull her arm free and run, but something about his expression made her pause. He didn't look like someone who was about to harm her, yet she couldn't trust a stranger in the middle of the night. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no sound came out. She was still too shocked. The man glanced behind them, his jaw tight, and then repeated, more urgently this time, "Please, walk faster." His voice wasn't harsh. It was firm, almost protective. Still, she didn't know what to do. Was this a trick? A way to scare her so she would follow him? Or was there really something behind them that she hadn't noticed? Her eyes darted around nervously. She tried to look behind her, but he gave her arm a slight tug, keeping her moving forward. Her pulse raced, and her legs moved without thinking. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she obeyed, too stunned to resist. The silence of the night seemed louder now. The sound of their hurried footsteps echoed sharply, bouncing off the walls of the buildings they passed. Her ears strained for any other noise, and soon, she heard it: another set of footsteps, faint but steady, following behind them. Her blood turned cold. The man wasn't lying. Someone really was there. Her breath quickened, and her eyes widened as she realized what was happening. She wanted to look back, to see who it was, but fear locked her head forward. If she turned, would she see a stranger's face staring at her from the shadows? The thought made her stomach twist. The man's grip stayed steady on her arm, not rough, but strong enough to guide her forward. She could feel the tension in his body, the urgency in his pace. His eyes kept darting behind them, scanning the street as if calculating what to do next. She tried to whisper, but her voice cracked. "Who is it?" "I don't know," he answered quickly, his eyes still scanning the darkness. "But he's been following you. I noticed it a few streets back." The words sank into her like stones. Someone had been watching her. Someone had chosen to trail her quietly through the empty streets. Her chest tightened, and fear gripped her throat. She had always thought her worries were only in her head, that she was overthinking whenever she felt someone behind her. But tonight, it was real. She swallowed hard, trying to process everything at once. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she should trust him completely, but now that she could hear those footsteps behind them, she realized she didn't have much choice. Alone, she would have panicked, frozen, maybe even gotten caught. At least with him, she wasn't defenseless. Her pace quickened naturally, her shoes tapping faster against the pavement. The man kept close to her side, his head turning every few steps to check their distance from whoever was following. She dared to glance once over her shoulder. At first, she saw nothing but darkness. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a figure moving in the distance, just far enough to stay hidden, just close enough to keep following. Her heart dropped. She snapped her head forward again, her throat dry. Every part of her wanted to scream, to run as fast as she could, but her body felt locked in place, moving stiffly with fear. The man noticed her shaking. "Don't stop," he whispered, his voice calm but firm. "We'll get to a safer place." His words gave her a thin thread of courage to hold onto. She nodded quickly, not trusting herself to speak. The street stretched ahead of them, darker with each step. The flickering streetlights seemed to dim at the worst possible times, and the silence made every sound from behind them stand out. The footsteps were still there, growing faint whenever they sped up, then returning whenever they slowed down. Whoever it was, they were determined to keep following. She thought about running to her house, but it was still too far away. If she tried, she might not make it before the figure caught up. Besides, she didn't want the stranger knowing where she lived. Panic pressed harder against her chest as the options slipped away one by one. The man suddenly tugged her gently to the side. "This way," he said, guiding her toward a slightly busier street ahead. She could see lights in the distance, shops that were still open, a few people walking. Relief flickered inside her. If they could just make it there, they wouldn't be so alone anymore. Her legs burned from the pace, but she didn't dare slow down. Every few seconds, she stole another glance behind them. The figure was still there, closer now, the sound of his shoes hitting the ground more distinct. She couldn't make out his face, only his shape moving in the shadows, but that was enough to terrify her. The man beside her straightened his shoulders, as if preparing for something. She could feel his hand tense slightly on her arm. For a moment, she wondered who he was, why he had chosen to help her instead of ignoring what he saw. Most people wouldn't have gotten involved. Maybe he was braver than she could ever be, or maybe he simply couldn't watch silently. Her chest heaved with each breath. The road to safety seemed both close and endless at the same time. She whispered again, barely able to form the words. "What if he catches us?" "Don't think about that," the man replied quietly. "Just keep moving." His calmness, even in such a tense moment, steadied her slightly. She clung to his words, forcing herself not to look back anymore, forcing her legs to keep moving forward. The sound of laughter carried faintly from the direction of the opened shops. The glow of neon signs painted the walls ahead. Relief spread through her chest, but she didn't let herself slow down, not until they were truly surrounded by people. The man quickened his pace, almost pulling her now. She followed without resisting, desperate to reach the light, desperate to escape the shadow that had been chasing them. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder, faster, as if the follower realized they were about to slip away. Her heart raced with panic, and her vision blurred with fear. She gripped her bag tightly, praying silently, her mind repeating one thought over and over, just a little farther, just a little farther. Her heart felt like it was beating in her ears as they hurried toward the brighter street. The sound of footsteps behind them grew sharper, almost matching their pace. Every step made her want to run, but fear kept her legs stiff, moving only as fast as the man tugging her forward. He seemed to know exactly where to go, his eyes always checking the surroundings, his body slightly leaning toward hers as if shielding her from whatever danger was behind. For a moment, she thought about breaking free and running on her own, but then she remembered the shadowy figure. If she ran the wrong way, if she stumbled, she would be caught. No, she couldn't take that risk. Staying close to the stranger seemed to be her only option. She hated feeling powerless, but tonight, she didn't care about pride. She just wanted to be safe. The night air grew colder as they moved deeper into the street. Her palms were sweaty, her bag strap slipping slightly, and she had to adjust it while still walking fast. She tried not to make any sudden movements that would slow them down. Every sound around her now felt magnified: the rustle of leaves, the creak of an old gate, the faint buzz of a light. And always, always, the steady rhythm of the footsteps behind them. She wanted to turn around, to see his face clearly, to know who was following them, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Just the thought of locking eyes with that unknown person filled her with dread. She had always imagined that if something like this ever happened, she would scream, fight, do anything to protect herself. But the truth was, fear paralyzed her. She realized how different real fear was compared to what she had pictured in her mind. The man at her side noticed her trembling. He whispered quietly, "Don't look back. Just stay close." His tone was steady, not panicked, and somehow that steadiness gave her a little courage. She nodded, her throat too tight to answer. They passed by a dark alley, and she caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of her eye. She flinched, her grip tightening on her bag. But when she looked again, it was empty. Maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe the follower wasn't alone. That thought nearly made her knees buckle. She forced herself to keep moving, step after step, focusing only on the lights ahead. Finally, they reached the edge of the darker street. Just a little farther, and they would be at the row of shops. She could already see the glow of neon signs, the faint sound of a television playing inside one of the stores, the comfort of life that wasn't hidden in shadows. But as they drew closer, the footsteps behind them quickened too. Whoever it was, he knew they were about to escape his reach. The man's hand tightened slightly on her arm, not to hurt her but to steady her. "Almost there," he muttered, his eyes sharp. His voice was calm, but she could feel the tension in the way he moved. He was preparing himself for whatever might happen in the next few seconds. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She prayed silently in her head, asking only to make it to safety, to have one more chance at walking home without fear. Her legs ached, her breath came in short bursts, but she forced herself to keep moving. She couldn't stop now. And then, just as they reached the brighter part of the street, she made the mistake of glancing back. The figure was closer now, much closer. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she saw the outline of a tall man in dark clothing. His steps were quick, purposeful, and he wasn't even trying to hide anymore. He wanted to be seen now. The realization sent a shiver through her entire body. She turned her head forward again, her eyes wide. "He's right behind us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know," the man beside her said firmly. "Don't stop. We'll lose him." They hurried into the brighter street, their shoes clattering loudly against the pavement. The sudden change in light gave her a thin wave of comfort, but she didn't dare relax. She knew the danger hadn't passed yet. They reached a row of closed shops, most with shutters down, but a few had faint lights glowing inside. She scanned desperately for signs of people. At last, she spotted one, a small convenience store with its door still open, a bright red sign above it. Relief flooded her chest, but she didn't slow down. If anything, her pace grew faster. The man glanced at her, then nodded toward the shop. That way. Don't look back. They turned sharply and rushed toward it. Her chest burned from running, but she didn't care. She wanted to be surrounded by people, even strangers, anyone who could see her if something happened. As they neared the shop, she heard the follower's footsteps quicken behind them. He was almost running now, chasing. Her fear reached its peak, and for a moment, she thought her legs would give out. But the sight of the bright store pushed her forward like a final burst of energy. The man yanked the shop door open and practically pulled her inside. The little bell above the door jingled, and the warm light washed over them. The sudden change from the dark street to the bright, safe space made her dizzy with relief. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on a shelf, her chest heaving with every breath. The shopkeeper, an older man arranging items behind the counter, looked up in surprise. He frowned at their hurried entrance, clearly sensing something was wrong. The man who had pulled her along gave him a quick nod, then turned his gaze back toward the door. Through the glass, she saw the follower stop. He stood just outside, his face hidden in the shadows, his body still. For a long, terrifying moment, he didn't move. He simply stood there, staring into the shop. She could feel his eyes even if she couldn't see them clearly. Her skin crawled with unease. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away. His figure blended into the darkness until he disappeared completely. She collapsed against the shelf, her legs weak. The shopkeeper hurried over, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" "What happened?" he asked, his voice kind but worried. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her throat felt too tight, her mind too full. She simply shook her head, trying to calm her breathing. The man beside her finally loosened his grip on her arm, giving her space. He was being followed, the man explained to the shopkeeper in a low voice. "I noticed it a few streets back. I didn't want to scare her, but when I saw how close he was getting, I had to act." She turned to look at him properly for the first time since this started. His face was serious but calm, his eyes kind in the shop's light. He didn't look like someone who meant her harm. He looked like someone who had stepped in at the right moment. Her chest still rose and fell quickly, but for the first time that night, she felt safe. She nodded slightly, whispering, "Thank you." The man simply gave her a small nod in return. "You don't need to thank me. Just be careful." The shopkeeper offered them water, and she took the bottle with trembling hands. As she drank, she realized how close she had come to something terrible. She didn't know who that follower was or what he wanted, and maybe she never would. But she knew one thing, she would never forget the sound of those footsteps behind her, nor the stranger who had grabbed her arm and told her to walk faster. The small shop felt like a shield between her and the dark street outside. Bright lights glowed warmly on the shelves stacked with snacks and bottled drinks. The faint hum of a refrigerator filled the silence. For a moment, she wanted to believe it was over, that stepping inside had erased the danger completely. But her body refused to calm down. Her hands still trembled as she held the bottle of water the shopkeeper had given her. She sipped slowly, trying to hide how shaken she was. Her eyes kept darting toward the glass door. Even though the man outside had walked away, she half expected him to return, his shadow reappearing under the streetlight, his face pressed against the glass. The thought alone made her heart beat faster. She clutched the bottle tighter as if it were some kind of protection. The stranger who had pulled her inside stood near the entrance, his shoulders straight, his expression focused. He seemed to be watching, waiting, making sure the figure really wasn't coming back. The shopkeeper frowned and asked again, "What happened out there?" The man answered calmly, "Someone was following her. I noticed it before she did. He was keeping his distance, but when I saw he was getting closer, I had to bring her here." The shopkeeper's face hardened with concern. "At this time of night, it's dangerous. You both should wait here for a while. Don't go out too soon." She nodded quickly, her voice too small to reply. The idea of stepping back outside so soon made her stomach twist. The stranger finally turned toward her. His eyes softened just slightly. "Are you all right?" She swallowed and managed to whisper, I think so." Her voice cracked, betraying the fear she was still holding inside. "You did well," he said simply. "You kept moving. That's what matters." Those words gave her a strange comfort, like she hadn't been completely powerless. Still, questions swirled in her head. Who was that man following her? Why her? What would have happened if the stranger hadn't stepped in? She didn't dare voice those thoughts, afraid of how real the answers might sound. The shop felt safer than the street, but it wasn't home. She couldn't stay there forever. The stranger seemed to understand that, too. He glanced toward the shopkeeper and asked, "Do you know if there's another route out of here? Somewhere brighter? I don't want her walking alone in the same direction." The shopkeeper nodded slowly. "There's a road behind the store that connects to the main street. It's longer, but there are more people and some tea stalls still open at this hour." She felt a wave of relief. The idea of walking somewhere with more people, more lights, seemed like the only safe option. But then another thought hit her: what if the man who had followed her was still out there, waiting? The idea of stepping outside again made her chest tighten. The stranger noticed her hesitation. "I'll walk with you," he said firmly. "Don't worry. You're not alone." Her eyes met his, searching for any sign of doubt. He didn't look uncertain. He didn't even look tired. He looked determined, as if protecting her was the only thing on his mind. She gave a small nod. The shopkeeper opened the back door for them, pointing toward the route. The narrow lane behind the shop was dim but connected to a busier road just a short walk away. The stranger motioned for her to walk beside him, not ahead, not behind. Side by side. The cool air outside hit her face again, and her fear instantly returned. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner dangerous. But with the stranger next to her, she felt slightly steadier. His presence was like a shield, reminding her she wasn't facing the night alone anymore. They walked quickly, their footsteps echoing softly against the narrow walls of the lane. She kept glancing sideways at him, wondering who he was. Why was he there that night? Why had he decided to help instead of ignoring her? She wanted to ask, but her throat felt heavy. Instead, she focused on moving forward, counting each step as though it brought her closer to safety. As they turned the corner, the faint glow of the main street appeared. She could hear voices in the distance, the clinking of teacups from small stalls still open, the sound of a motorbike starting. The sight and sounds of life eased her chest slightly. But then, just as she let herself breathe, the stranger's body tensed. His eyes flicked behind them. Her heart jumped instantly. She didn't want to look, but her curiosity betrayed her. She turned her head. A shadow moved at the far end of the lane. Her breath caught. The man who had been following them was back. His outline was unmistakable, tall and deliberate, walking toward them slowly. Panic surged through her body like a wave. She grabbed the stranger's arm without thinking. "He's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," he said quietly, his tone calm but urgent. "Don't panic. We're almost at the main road. Just a few more steps. Her legs shook as she hurried beside him, her grip tightening on his sleeve. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like prey being chased. The lane seemed longer now, stretching endlessly before them. Each step the follower took behind them felt like a drum beat pressing into her chest. The stranger straightened, his pace quicker now, almost a light jog. She followed, her breath coming out in sharp bursts. Her fear turned into raw energy, pushing her legs to move faster despite their exhaustion. They burst out of the lane onto the main street. Bright lights washed over them, and voices from the tea stalls surrounded them. The sudden noise and movement felt like salvation. She gasped, relief mixing with adrenaline. But when she glanced back one last time, she saw him. The follower had stopped at the mouth of the lane. He didn't step into the light. He just stood there, staring, half hidden in the shadows, watching them disappear into the crowd. Her knees nearly gave way. She stumbled, and the stranger steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said firmly. "He won't follow us here." She wanted to believe him. The noise of the main street wrapped around her like a blanket. For the first time that night, she didn't feel alone. Still, the image of that shadow standing at the end of the lane would haunt her. The stranger guided her toward one of the tea stalls. They sat on a bench, surrounded by people chatting and sipping hot tea. The ordinary scene felt unreal after what had just happened. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop her body from shaking. The stranger finally looked at her properly. "You should call someone," he suggested. "Family, a friend. Someone who can meet you here." She nodded, fumbling for her phone. Her fingers shook as she typed a quick message to her mother, telling her she was safe but asking if someone could come pick her up. She didn't mention the details, she didn't have the strength yet. As she waited, she stole a glance at the man beside her. He was calm, sipping a small cup of tea the stall owner had handed him. He didn't look like a hero or a fighter. He looked like an ordinary man, but tonight, he had become her shield. The night wasn't over, but the worst had passed. She sat quietly, her chest still heavy, but slowly, very slowly, she felt the fear loosen its grip. She knew she would never forget this night, the sound of footsteps chasing her, the stranger's voice urging her to walk faster, the moment light finally replaced the dark dot. She sat on the wooden bench near the tea stall, her body finally beginning to register the weight of everything that had just happened. Her legs felt weak, her hands were trembling slightly, and her throat was still dry even though she had drunk water earlier. Around her, the street buzzed with late-night life, men talking over steaming cups of tea, the smell of fried snacks filling the air, and the occasional sound of a motorbike passing by. It was so ordinary, yet her mind couldn't settle into that ordinary feeling. The night had shifted something inside her. The stranger who had helped her sat beside her, not too close, giving her space but still close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. He hadn't said much since they arrived at the main road. He simply sipped his tea quietly, his eyes scanning the area as though making sure the shadowy figure hadn't followed them here. His calmness contrasted with the storm of emotions inside her. She wondered how he managed to stay so composed when she felt like she was falling apart inside. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was her mother calling. She answered quickly, her voice softer than usual. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm at the tea stalls near the main road. Can you come with Uncle to get me?" Her mother's worried voice on the other side made her eyes sting with tears she had been holding back. She reassured her quickly, not wanting her mother to panic too much. "I'm safe now. I'll explain later. Just come soon, please." When she hung up, she felt a small weight lift off her chest. Help was on the way. Home was near. Safety was within reach. She turned her eyes toward the stranger again. He hadn't looked at her while she spoke, as if giving her privacy, but now he met her gaze calmly. For the first time since the ordeal began, she really noticed the lines of his face, the steadiness of his eyes. He didn't look like someone extraordinary. He looked like someone who had simply chosen to do the right thing at the right time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "I don't know what would have happened if you weren't there." He shook his head gently, his tone steady. "You don't need to thank me. Anyone should have done the same." But she knew deep down that not everyone would have. Many people would have looked away, too afraid or too busy to involve themselves. He had chosen differently. That choice had changed everything for her tonight. For a while, they both sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the street. She tried to calm her breathing, to slow her racing thoughts. But her mind kept replaying the image of the figure in the shadows, the steady footsteps behind her, the way her chest had tightened with fear. She knew it would take a long time before that memory faded. Her mother and uncle arrived not long after. She spotted them from a distance, her mother's worried face visible even under the dim lights. As soon as they reached her, her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as though she might slip away. Her uncle looked at the stranger with curiosity, then at her, silently asking for an explanation. She pulled away slightly and gestured toward the man. "He helped me. Someone was following me, and he got me here safely." Her uncle immediately extended his hand, gratitude clear on his face. "Thank you for protecting her. Not everyone would have done that." The stranger shook his hand simply, almost modestly. "I just did what anyone should do." Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she thanked him softly, her voice trembling. She could hardly express the relief she felt knowing her daughter was safe. The stranger stood up then, as though ready to leave. She felt a sudden pang of sadness at the thought of him disappearing from her life just as suddenly as he had entered it. She wanted to say more, to ask his name, to know who he was, but for a moment, the words caught in her throat. Finally, she managed to speak. "I don't even know your name." He gave a small smile, the first one she had seen from him. "It doesn't matter. Just get home safe. That's what's important." With that, he nodded politely to her family and began walking away, blending into the night like he had appeared from it. She watched him go until he disappeared into the distance, her heart filled with a strange mix of gratitude and wonder. He had come into her life like a passing shadow, but his actions would remain with her forever. Her uncle led them to the car, and as they drove home, her mother held her hand tightly. The warmth of her mother's grip made her realize just how close she had been to losing that comfort tonight. She leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights pass by, and for the first time since leaving work, she felt truly safe. When they reached home, her mother refused to let her out of sight. She made her sit down, gave her warm tea, and kept fussing over her as though she were a little girl again. At first, she resisted, embarrassed, but then she gave in. Tonight, she didn't mind being cared for. Tonight, she needed it. Later, lying in her room, she stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The events replayed in her mind over and over: the sudden grip on her arm, the whispered words "walk faster," the chilling footsteps in the dark. Fear still lingered in her chest, but so did gratitude. She thought about how life could change in a single moment, how one ordinary walk home could turn into something unforgettable. Over the next few days, she found herself replaying the night again and again, sometimes trembling, sometimes shaking her head in disbelief. She realized how fragile safety could be, how quickly the world could turn dangerous when least expected. But she also realized something else: kindness could appear in the most unexpected form, in the most unexpected place. She made changes after that night. She never walked alone so late again. She arranged for either her uncle to pick her up or for a colleague to leave with her. She carried a small whistle her mother insisted on buying for her, just in case. She became more alert, more careful, no longer dismissing the uneasy feelings she sometimes had on dark streets. But more than anything, she carried the memory of the stranger who had walked beside her. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he had gone, but she remembered his steady voice, his calm presence, his simple but powerful words, "Walk faster." That night taught her that the world held both shadows and light. There were dangers she couldn't deny, but there were also people willing to step into those dangers for someone else. That thought gave her comfort, reminding her not to lose faith in humanity, even when fear tried to take over. Years later, whenever she passed that road, she still felt a chill run through her. But she also felt a quiet strength inside her. She had survived that night. She had walked through fear and reached safety. And though she never saw the stranger again, she carried his courage in her heart, using it as a reminder to always stay aware, to always stay strong, and to never underestimate the power of one person's choice to help. Life went on, as it always does. She continued to work, to dream, to live. But the memory of that midnight walk remained like a story etched into her soul, a story she would never forget, a story she would one day tell others, not to scare them, but to remind them to stay alert, to take precautions, and to trust that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, kindness can find its way to you.